welcome to our workshop. Really excited to be delivering this workshop with you and for you today. You are here to learn more about platform engineering, how to build your own internal developer platform, IDP. With Humanitec Orchestrator, we will talk about Backstage, Kubernetes, Terraform. So I hope you will enjoy this session. A lot to cover, so I will start right away, right? And yes, a recording will be shared with you. And if you haven't checked yet, please check your inbox. You should have received an email in this format from Humanitec at humanitec.com. That's an invitation to the Humanitec organization where you could play while I'm doing and delivering this workshop. I will do some hands-on stuff that you could do. Other part will be a demo that you could watch. If you don't want to do anything on your side, you could just watch and learn about the concept. It's all good. If you didn't receive this email or you have issue to log in, apologize, but during this virtual event, I and we don't have time to debug anything. So bear with us and just follow along. You will understand the concept. That's the purpose of this workshop, right? So please enjoy and do as hands-on pieces as you want. Also follow along. So you should have received this email. Please check this email, claim your account, and you could participate. Again, I'm Mathieu Benoit. I'm customer success engineer at Humanitec. I'm helping my customer implementing their own internal developer platform with their own tools on top of the Humanitec Orchestrator, right? And other pieces that we will cover today. Very brief introduction about what's platform engineering, what could be an IDP, and what Humanitec is offering. Then we will talk about the reference architecture that we will use in the actual workshop. It's a jam-packed 2 hours, so let's go through that. By the end of the session, again, if you don't want to do the hands-on experience, you could just follow along. You will understand most of the concept, right? You will understand what's SCORE, the SCORE specification, the SCORE workload specification, how it helps to abstract things for the developer and improve their cognitive load and their experience. On the other hand, you will understand the orchestrator, Humanitec Orchestrator, what role it plays on top of your own IDP that you may want to build. And we will see the differences between a platform versus a portal. Maybe there is some confusion out there and what the difference is, right? So you will play with that as well. If you have any question, please drop them in the chat and I will take it as I'm going through the content. Yes, we have a Q&A session at the end, but please put your question as they come. With that, they will be more contextualized. It will help me to better answer them. Where we are coming from. We are coming with this, what we call the sysadmin world, where it was more about standardization by separation, right? I got a dev, and we got this sysadmin world, and in the middle, we got this wall of confusion, of silos. And then we move the cultural approach to say, maybe we should tear down and break the wall between the dev and the ops, right? That's where DevOps came. And the mantra or philosophy was more about, okay, if you build it, you will test it, you will secure it, and you will run it, right? Kind of. Maybe with some help, but that's what DevOps came from. And it was good, right? It answers some needs. But at the end of the day, some confusion issue came with that because it generated some shift left of everything, if I could say, to the developer. I was graduated as software developer. Should I know about security, networking, infrastructure, etc.? Maybe not, right? So that's where platform engineering is just taking advantage and experience from both worlds and say, we will have people dedicated to their own role, right, and expertise, but how we could facilitate the collaboration with more automation, for example. right? So that's where IDP, internal developer platform, platform engineering is coming from. There is a lot of traction today. As a dev today, how I could self-serve, but still have some speed in order to ship code in production for the business to make money and to satisfy my end user. The CIO on the leadership team, how we could optimize and go faster in production. Architect, how we drive standardization about the architecture approach, security approach, how we could save some cloud cost, for example, and control that part. How we drive more automation, how we could be more compliant by design, right? So that's all about that. And we will focus on two main personas. There is more, but the goal is to say on one end, there is a developer persona. And those people, they want to ship code in production, like I mentioned, right? They don't want to deal with Terraform and Kubernetes. Yes, on LinkedIn, that's perfect. I could say that I do front-end, back-end, DevOps, security, Kubernetes, Terraform, right? But for a business perspective, at scale, when you have thousands of developers, hundreds of developers in your company, if everyone is doing that, they don't do what they should do, delivering front-end and back-end code in production, right? And on the other hand, we will have the platform engineering and the platform engineer persona. Yes, there is more than these people. There is the security infrastructure, observability team, and other helping those people. But the goal for them is to standardize and having a consistent way for the developer to do their job, right? And be very autonomous and fast. So what we have is what we are looking for the platform engineering, right? We are looking for the developer, the velocity, for the business, the velocity, how we increase productivity, and what we call reducing the cognitive load. How I help a developer doing an action without doing 10 actions to accomplish what they need. On the other hand, for the platform engineering and all the technical stakeholder, how we standardize, how we abstract as much as we can, right? And less technical, but very important, how I could see my platform now as a product. And that's very important. Some people are just technical and are investing in technical approach in their IDP. And we have seen that failing because you need someone or a team more focused on the product. Because guess what? The developer are now the customer of the platform engineers, right? So you need to invest as well in a product owner, in a UX team, for example, to better understand their need, how to interface, how to expose, how to support, how to help onboarding. And all of that is complementary, right? So I hope that makes sense. And I already got a question, so maybe let me grab it. Are the platform engineer the one who makes the content asset template for developer to consume? Or is it a different persona? SRE perhaps? That's a really good question, Adriano. Thank you. And yeah, let me answer that. You remember when I said the platform engineer, they are not alone. They will be making sure they standardize, right, what the other technical stakeholder are doing. Because you should see your platform, your IDP, of a platform of a platforms or multiple stakeholders. SRE is a good example. How I have observability, how I help debugging in production. You could have a cloud engineering team. You could have a container team, a CI/CD team, a security team, name it, right? And the goal with the platform engineering, with tool and automation, yes, platform engineer will have the ability to standardize, make template, make more automation in order to fulfill the requirement of all the other stakeholders. And I hope during the workshop, you will see in action how to do that. That's a really good question. And yes, typically, that's the important role the platform engineering team has and the IDP you are building has. Let's continue. There is 3 pillars for the adoption of a platform engineering initiative or building your own IDP. Abstraction, how you, again, enable self-service, reduce cognitive load, drive speed. On the other hand, you want standardization, how you reduce manual action, ticket ups, right? Repetitive work. And visualization, how you make sure everyone from leadership to developer, different, based on their needs, right? How you could visualize what you are building, what you are exposing, etc., etc. And I have also another question. Most development in our company is around the data platform with tasks including data ingestion, data transformation, ML, development sandbox, spin up and speed down, data scientists to experiment. How does the component and concept apply? Actually, that's a really good scenario, right? How your data engineer or data scientist or other stakeholder, they are the developer. They are the customer of your platform you will build. So that's exactly a good use case. How you will understand what they need, what they do, and how you could simplify their day-to-day experience, right? So yes, they are a developer, and the platform to support them will be able to accomplish that on a generic aspect, right? So typical scenario as well. What we will see is on the abstraction, we will see SCORE. It's a CNCF project, open source, allowing the abstraction. We will see the orchestration for the standardization for the platform engineer and all the other stakeholders to expose the platform to the developer, and the visualization part. We will see today the Humanitec portal as well as Backstage, and we will see the complementary aspect of them. First, SCORE. SCORE is this YAML file, if you haven't seen yet. That's where I could define the name of my workload, right? I'm working on an application locally. I will show you in action, but typically here is my workload. Here is the dependencies. I need a Postgres, I need an S3 bucket, and I need to expose my workload via a DNS, right? Where is it? In which environment? You don't know at this stage. You just defined a SCORE specification, a workload specification, which is environment agnostic. The same file will be deployed in dev, staging, and prod. And you don't know the underneath platform, the runtime. Is it Kubernetes? Is it something else? You don't know. And you shouldn't know, right? And the technical detail about where and how, that's the abstraction level. So that's the kind of abstraction you could have here. And you just request, I want these dependencies. And you could see on the variable section, you could inject the placeholder of the generating value when people will provision the Postgres, the S3 bucket, and the DNS. You will be able to inject at deployment time and at runtime your actual value based on the environment and the platform, right? So that's the SCORE file. On the other hand, you have the orchestrator. And we will see that the orchestrator, as platform engineer and all the technical stakeholder, SRE, cloud engineer, security, will be able to inject recipes, right? That's what we call resource definition. And here it's an example. It's another YAML file, nothing to do with the SCORE file. And here it's about, I want to define a well-supported golden path. I want to support a use case. And here you could see it's a Redis database. I want in this criteria at the very bottom, right? For staging environment, for example, I want to support Redis. And by the way, it's a Terraform module that my cloud engineer are doing and maintaining and authoring. But here I want to expose this recipe. So anyone asking for Redis in staging will have this recipe. And I will do all of that for all the recipes I want to expose to my developers, what I'm supporting and how I will support it, right? So that's very important concept because you will register this kind of resource definition as recipe. In a nutshell, here, platform engineer will define all the recipes and define where to use it, right? To use them. On the other hand, the developer with a SCORE file will request to the orchestrator their SCORE file, in this case, Postgres and S3. The orchestrator will look for Postgres and S3 in this context. I'm deploying that in dev or in staging and in prod. Okay, I will pick up the associated recipes and resource definition, and I will build, the orchestrator will build the associated resource graph, right? And then the graph will be deployed. Each node could be deployed in Kubernetes, could be deployed in AWS, could be deployed in Azure, you name it. You will define that, right? As an example, I want Redis, going to the orchestrator, picking up the proper recipe, and actually adding the node in the resource graph for the finally the provision of this guy, right? Third component, visualization, right? And self-service. Here, there is a Humanitec portal where you could see in action the status of your project, your workload, your environment, as well as the graph I was illustrating, where you could see all the dependencies. And you could see what we call the direct dependencies. I'm asking for S3, Postgres, but maybe the SRE team, like you mentioned earlier, Adriano, and other stakeholders, security, cloud engineer, may be able to inject other item and node in this graph on behalf of the developer and abstract it from the developer, right? So they will ask for direct dependencies, but you will be able to inject implicit dependencies. If you are familiar with Kubernetes, you could inject, for example, workload identity, a role, a policy, a role binding, some security observability tool, annotation, label, etc., right? But the developer, they don't care, they don't know. You will be able to do that, right? So I hope that makes sense for this first introduction. We just saw the Humanitec portal, and you could choose. You could use the Humanitec portal coming with the orchestrator, Humanitec orchestrator on the left, but complementary or in place. You could use Backstage, Port, Cortex, other portal, and they will be able to interact with external systems plus the Humanitec orchestrator, right? If you have already invested in Backstage, maybe you want to continue and just plug the orchestrator, Humanitec orchestrator with Backstage in order to complete your developer portal experience, right? So we will see that in action. We will use actually Backstage today. The architecture is very this. The TLDR is what it's in yellow is what you bring with Humanitec. The rest in white is kind of your stuff. So if you are using GitLab, you use GitLab. If you use IntelliJ and not Visual Studio Code, you bring your own tool. It's working the same. If you are using Azure, here I'm illustrating with GCP, Google Cloud, but Azure, AWS, OpenShift runtime, whatever, you pick and choose, right? You replace your own reference architecture. The yellow pieces remain the same, right? So on the developer control plane, developer will have the portal, Backstage or the Humanitec, will have score in addition to what they have already. On the other hand, the CI/CD, you will keep it. You will just integrate with the Humanitec orchestrator, and we will be able to deploy in Kubernetes and in your cloud provider, right? And you bring your cloud monitoring, or SRE tool and security tool, right? All of that is an integration with the Humanitec orchestrator. I hope that makes sense for now. And I see that we have some questions, so maybe let me grab them. Is there any way we could get this slide deck today to share with our team instead of tomorrow? I will let Sophia deal with that, but I'm okay with that. So sure, let's see how we could do that. Again, I mentioned there is a lot of reference architecture, OpenShift, runtime, GitLab, GitHub, Azure DevOps. You pick and choose, and we have some open source slide that you could choose and build and draw your own. And we have also some pre-built recipes, what we call the resource pack. In addition to that, in the different cloud provider or even in cluster. So just some reference here to share with you. And yeah, let's do the actual workshop, right? We took some time here, but I think it's very important for the having some same context for everyone. I hope that makes sense. Please drop your question, remark, concern. Again, you may have received this email in your inbox. Check the junk email, maybe. Claim your account now, and you will be able to see Humanitec portal in action. And if you want to do some hands-on that I will guide you through, please, you could play with that. If you don't want, or if you have technical issue, bear with me, no worries, just follow along. You will understand the concept. Don't panic, don't quit, just follow along and ask questions. The goal is for you to understand the concept here. And if you want to play, please claim your account now. The goal is to have two personas that you will see and play, developer and platform engineer, right? And in the platform engineer, like someone asked earlier, SRE, security, cloud engineer, you will see how they integrate here. 5 steps for the workshop. We will see an onboarding from Backstage, right? So as a developer, how I onboard a new project into the platform, right? First step. Second step, now how I set up my local development environment, right? Third, more a demo, but you could play with the 2 first. Third will be more a demo, where I will be able to show you create a pull request to create an ephemeral environment and having the ability to test very quickly from my platform with temporary resources. And then fourth, I will be able to add database dependencies. I will be able to use in-cluster database or outside with Terraform. I will show you that. And the last will be more about, okay, how I inject more observability tool or security or governance, right? So I will show you some best practice here and some example. I hope that makes sense and that it's exciting you. So actually, let me jump directly and just stop having the slide. What I want to share with you, actually, let me continue here. So we will see this guy here. We will see this developer inner loop, and we will see this scenario. So let me put some context. The goal, we will play this first persona and action and activities. I'm a developer, I'm locally developing my stuff. And at some point, I will push that in my CI/CD pipeline, in my repo, and it will trigger some CI/CD pipeline. Then the CI/CD pipeline will actually deploy things, not directly to Kubernetes, not directly to the cloud provider, but through and via the Humanitec Orchestrator. That's where the platform engineer comes and will help with defining the recipes. And the recipes will be built again with SRE, security, and cloud engineer here in order to fulfill the request and the deployment. So what you could do is starting with this guy. So here I will share the link. Here. You could click on the link here. You could take a picture here for scanning the QR code, but typically you will be able to go there. So if you want to play, that's the time for you to do that. If you don't want, or if you have technical issue, bear with me. This one is a public link, so you shouldn't have any complexity to do the first step. So let's do it, right? Any question, any remark, please drop the note in the chat, sorry. Here, I'm in Backstage. I don't know if you're familiar with Backstage. It's what we call a portal, right? Here, let's say my organization decided that all the developer, we are 1,000 developer shipping code in production. And you mentioned data engineer, you mentioned data scientist. It could be this kind of developer, not just front-end, back-end, right? All the developer. And the organization made the decision to expose our portal, our tools, our ecosystem with more automation in a centralized portal. Here, I could self-serve myself. Here, you could see, I could see the list of my project that I have already onboarded, for example, right? But I could also see the technical documentation to do stuff, right? Or I could use pre-created template. Someone asked about who is generating the template. You will decide. But at the end of the day, you need an entry point. to expose to your developer. Here, for now, my organization is just exposing 2 templates. If I want to onboard a new project, let's say I want to do a Node.js service with Postgres, or I want to do a sample service, or I want to do Java with MySQL, you will have your template, right? And I will show you what it's generating. But here, I'm onboarding a new project, right? Or an existing project, it depends. But I want to be part of this platform, to be well supported and having this level of abstraction. So here, what we will do is actually, let me pick up this guy here. I could fill out some form and some information. So let's say, and you could play along, right? So you could do that already. Let's do this. Apologize. So I just have one field I could review, and here I could say create, right? So here, what it's doing, it's actually doing 2 things. It's onboarding the project in Humanitec, and we will show that in action. And second, here, it's creating a GitHub repository for me, right? Maybe it already exists, but here I'm creating. I'm using a template for enterprise ready. So here I could open in the catalog. So now you could see, and we have already some people playing. Thank you for that. Here I now have more projects, right, that I have access to. And the one I just provisioned is this guy. And you could see that I could see in Humanitec now, I have already an environment and the deployment is in progress. I will show you why. But I have some technical documentation if I want. And I have access to also the repository, right? So let me open this repository that was created just 1 minute ago, right? So I could zoom in a little bit here. But here, the scaffolder just created from Backstage this entire repository with some example, a Docker file, Node.js application, and in our case, and some CI/CD template already in place, and a score file, right? How I will define my workload to be deployed in the platform, that's an example. Now, the source of truth is this repo. I could bring my own code, I could adapt, and now I could commit, and having this this loop with some CI/CD, you could see initial commit already triggered an action who were able to deploy in Humanitec, right? So if I open this guy, there is a GitHub action that was triggered with this first commit, right? And look at this. It was able to build the container, push in a registry, and deploy this container into the platform made by Humanitec, right? That's very simple, but I hope you catch what I'm illustrating here. So what I want to do here is actually opening this this repo, right? And if you want to play here with that, I don't know if you're familiar, you could download locally, right? Your source code. But what you could do also is using code space, right? Creating a code space in GitHub, and you have a web environment, web IDE. That's what I did here, right? And here, what could be interesting for you to use that with VS Code is we have what we call the VS Code extension for Humanitec, right? And I will play a bit with that. But before that, let me browse the file I mentioned, right? Here I git clone locally, or again in code space, and I have my Docker file, I have my source code, for example. I could have some other asset here. So I'm in my local environment, and I have this score file, right? Again, what's the name of my workload, how and which port I want to expose. Here are the metadata of my container, right? Some environment variable, and the dependencies I mentioned, right? So what's interesting here is, let's say I want to add some other field, right? And can I use this guy here? We could see that this property is not allowed. So I will have with this IDE some help in order to build and author my score file, right? With what's available or not in the specification, right? But we could also do something more, which is bucket. And I could say, hey, I want an S3 bucket. Why not, right? And look at this. Here, because I'm connected to my organization, right? I'm able to see that this S3 type is not supported by my organization, by my platform engineer team, right? And we could see on the left, we could see the notion of available resources. And you could see environment, service on the left, volume, Redis, DNS, root, TLS, and Postgres, right? So for example, if I run Redis, now I'm allowed to do that, right? So what I can do here is committing my code and having this deployment happening behind the scene. I will show you. But before leaving, let's say I committed in an environment, in a branch, and it did some deployment in the Humanitec. What I can do without leaving, again, my IDE and local environment, I could use, right, before interacting with my platform, I could locally deploy this core file with Docker Compose without using Humanitec. I'm not telling you that all your developers should do that because it's maybe too much technical detail and too much technology to bring locally. But sometimes developer wants to run my container locally in order to see if it's working. Because if it's not working in Kubernetes, maybe I could catch such error here. Or maybe what I'm going to show you, deploying the score file, not in Humanitec, but in Docker Compose, could be made and run in and tested in the CI/CD pipeline before actually deploying in the platform. So here, we could run this command. And I won't go too much in detail here, but I'm taking this core file, right? Exact same core file with a lot of abstraction and deploy this guy locally. And here, what happened is I could see that some container, a Redis container, a DNS with Nginx, and my actual container is running locally. I'm not interacting with Humanitec yet. Here, I could test. And for example, I could curl my local host, and I could see that, for example, here I have my application resolving and being working successfully, right? So I could push that now and having more trigger and CI/CD pipeline over there. So what I did is to accelerate a bit this demo is I already built a pull request in another repo, right? So I'm still in this same project, right? And I have a pull request because I did a feature branch. And look at this. I need to change the color of the background and I need to change the message. Why not? I'm doing a feature request. And here, so I change this file, right? I change the color, I change the message. It's in the score file. It could be the Docker file. It could be any package of my application. It could be my application itself, whatever you change. You want to graduate at some point. But before going live, you may want to create what we call an ephemeral environment, right? So what you have here, to step back maybe a little bit and making sure everyone is following, we now have some people doing that. I don't know if you have some question here, but here, what we did is we have, for example, this guy, right? We created a development environment, right? And I have here a DNS, right? Because I asked that in this core file, right? So here, what I want to show you is this guy here in Humanitec portal. I was in Backstage, able to read the number of project, environment, and external dependencies. But typically, that's what I had, right? I could have this guy here having the graph of the resolution. Oh, just refreshing. Yes. So I'm in my development environment and the trigger deploy this. I have a DNS that was exposed and generated for me. I could test my application. And here I could see also the dependencies, right? Look at this. I got from my workload, right, a DNS, and I got also some other TLS cert. I got some ingress object. Here as developer, I don't know, right? But all the technical stakeholder building my platform decided to inject some object, right? To fulfill security, networking, whatever they need, right? But I have a functional workload and deployment being standardized and compliant with my enterprise, right? My company, sorry. So that's very appealing and interesting for having this self-service abstraction and behind the scenes some standardization, right? And the demo is not pre-recorded. I'm doing that live. Ronaldo, thank you for the question. I don't know why you said that, but funny enough, please, if you have question, let me know. So here, what I could show you is on the last deployment, I could see the number of workload container. I could see the graph I mentioned, right? And I could also see, for example, the number of container, my dependencies, the DNS actually, some environment variables, some ingress, some annotation, right? But I could also see some logs, right? Oh, good question, Ronaldo. Yeah, I created the repo 1 week ago. Yeah, to prepare this workshop. Good catch. Thank you for the question. But the demo and the workshop and the actual talking here is live, not AI generated and not pre-recorded. Thank you for asking. So you see here, I have also container logs, right? I'm not anymore pinging my ops team. Hey, could you give me the logs? Or I'm not running myself kubectl because I don't have access to the cluster. I don't know where it is. So here I could have some self-serving. I could have some metadata to track the history of my deployment. And if I have some history, I could see the deployment history, right? I just have one here, but I could clone from an history from 1 week. I could show and see the diff between two deployments. I could redeploy, etc., right? So that's what I'm able to do. I hope that makes sense. Otherwise, let me know. What I want to show you now is I created, you remember, I was there. I created this pull request. It's a feature request and a CI/CD GitHub action was triggered, right? And did the exact same CI/CD, but in a pull request than earlier, and this guy was 1 week ago as well. But this guy was able to do the Docker Compose test with the exact same score file. It was testing in Kubernetes kind cluster locally in the pipeline without Humanitec. And then build the container because the unit test integration test worked. And then go build and push the container in the registry. And then deploy the score manifest, the score file, right? In a specific environment for a specific project, right? And I didn't deploy in development environment, the main development, nor staging, nor production. I was in PR-1. And guess what? Look at this. The PR triggered the CI/CD who created this temporary ephemeral environment. So on demand for any feature request, if you want to do that, you could create a new environment, right? And that's what I did. So if I go back to the PR itself, here I have, yeah, it's working with Docker Compose, Kubernetes locally, and oh yeah, it was successful in Humanitec as well. I could see the resource graph with a light version here without the entire Humanitec portal. I could see some detail again about my things, the DNS, the value, the output generated, right? And I could see also some diff between the two deployments. So I was able to replace some stuff or add more stuff between the two deployments, right? The main branch and my feature request branch. And I have the DNS here. I could test my application. And guess what? Now I change the color and I have this new message. Wonderful. So what I could do here is either close the pull request or merge the pull request. But what I want to show you is here, I could see in Humanitec this new created environment. So in PodInfo, I got this development and I got PR1, right? If you're trying to do a pull request, that's the part where you don't have a right to approve the pull request yourself or create a pull request in this repo. You will need to fork. That's why it's more this part a demo. But please bear with me and follow along, because here now I have two environments and I may have staging, prod, etc. Right? And I have a status again, a brand new DNS generated, and I could test my things here, right? And when, again, I'm satisfied, I could also merge a pull request. So let's do it, right? What this guy is going to do is two things. Look at this. There is two triggers here. There is a deploy podinfo, because I just merged into main branch. So it will deploy in development, because I decided this workflow, or my company decided this workflow for me. And in the meantime, it's deleting the ephemeral environment, because I want to save some compute or some cost if I'm using external dependencies in a cloud provider, right? I could create on demand a database and delete it to avoid cost, and having this agility to test things. And here, if I go back to the UI, I could see that the environment is deleted. So if I refresh, guess what? Now in podinfo, I just have development, PR1 disappeared because I decided that. I don't need it anymore. And I have now the new commit just did right now, right? And it was a merge from this new color and new message pull request, right? And now I could test and open this still same DNS in development. And yeah, I have my new feature merge graduated in development, and I could continue and promote in staging, in production, depending on your own workflow. You see? So I hope that makes sense. But that was part of the story here from the developer inner loop. Now I could have this create ephemeral environment. So we are on the developer personas, right? In terms of interaction with tools. Maybe a lot of tools, but simplified version could be done. Again, if you want just Backstage, you could just have Backstage. If you want the portal, you could have it. That's something very appealing and interesting to have in place. So again, what we did, we onboarded from Backstage, a new project. We did the setup on the local environment here, right? And we did this ephemeral environment, right? So what I want to show you now is something more on the platform engineer perspective, right? So we change the hat a little bit here, how all of that is happening. It's not magical. That's where, as platform engineer and all the technical stakeholder, you will be able to expose what we just saw, this level of abstraction, this level of self-serving, right? So let's see that in action now. What I want to show you, and let's double check, we have some people, maybe 10 people able to create some project here. Let me know if you have any question, any feedback. But that's the kind of scenario we could see here. You could play along with me. What I want to show you, if I go back to my own application, right? So it was this guy. And you remember, I got some, for example, DNS, right? So what I want to show you is the relationship between this and what I called earlier the recipes or the resource definition. And we could see already that I have some information. This DNS was generated with this provisioning time, for example. I got this value by someone. And I may have some information about what we call the driver type, right? But at the end of the day, it was using this recipe, right? So if I go and I open this, we will open the resources section. By the way, I'm in administrator. It's kind of the platform engineer role here in Humanitec. But as developer, I won't see all these entries in the navigation panel, right? Because at the end of the day, I will have airbag and I will be able to just see the information related to me and not to another project that I don't have access to. So in terms of segmentation and airbag access, there is more control. In this case, I'm just admin. Even if I'm playing two personas, I'm seeing everything. Supposedly, I will just see my application, right? And not the application for my colleagues that I don't have access for segmentation again and security perspective. So going back to the resources as an admin, that's where I will be able to define my recipes, right? So here, the TLDR is, I'm doing that via the UI, but at the end of the day, you could do that via the API, the Humanitec CLI, or Terraform provider, right? As platform engineer and all the stakeholder, you will be able to populate and create all these recipes with automation tool, right? Here I'm illustrating in the UI to make sure you got the concept. But at the end of the day, I want to add a recipe. For example, I want to add a recipe for Redis. I want to expose Redis to my developer. And here, when I selected the type, that's the what I'm going to expose, my SQL, Postgres, DNS, whatever I want to expose. Now, the second question is how I want to concretely implement Redis, right? And maybe you want to do, in some cases, Redis in cluster or outside. So that's why here you have the type of the how. Is it existing, what we call echo? You have already a connection string of a Redis database existing over there. You will be able to define that. Do you want to generate Redis with a container in cluster to save some cost? Or if you want to have Redis in cluster, so you could use template, which is Kubernetes manifest. Or for example, you could use Terraform. I want to do Terraform apply with my Terraform module over there in this cloud provider, AWS, GCP, Azure, wherever, right? So you see here from a Redis, because my platform is a product, I want to expose Redis. Now it's how I want to implement that. And yes, there is multiple needs out there, but you have the ability to standardize or give option to your developer to self-serve on that, right? And we have what we call container driver here, which is a generic driver. So for example, if you do Pulumi, OpenTofu, if you do Azure ARM template, if you do Azure Bicep, name it, your own infrastructure as code component and tool for provisioning dependencies and infrastructure, you could do that here, right? So we saw the what, Redis, the how I will actually generate this guy, right? And now there is another notion. There is a notion of when. Because guess what? You could have multiple Redis. And that's what I have here, right? Resource type, Redis. In this example, I have two resource definition Redis, resource type on the right? And you could see the driver, that's the how. And I got a Terraform one and a template one. Now you will be able to define, depending on your need, depending on the need of your developer, when they will be, each of them, they will be able to be leveraged, to be used, right? So if I open the Redis in cluster, right? By the way, I could see now the usage, and I see that one person is using it in this project, online boutique, in development, right? So I have some information. But look at this. I have the when here. It's a criteria. And here, this criteria, resource class is default, means everyone for any context. for this project, this other project, in dev, staging, and prod, everyone by default will have this guy here, right? And that's where you could have some granularity. If you want to be more restrictive, you could say for all the environment type development, and you could combine. You could say for this project, and you could combine and or condition to be, again, generic and generalizing, or being granular and overriding some behavior, right? So that's how you will be able to have multiple recipes exposed to your developer, right? So very appealing, especially here in my example. By default, everyone will use what we call here the template driver for Redis. So by default, everyone will deploy Redis container in Kubernetes cluster to save some cost, to be agile, etc., etc. And here I brought my own Kubernetes manifest, like I mentioned, right? So I could author this guy. Again, I'm showing you in the UI, but all of that is via infrastructure as code or CLI for automating this part. But here I'm actually bringing my own implementation of Redis in cluster, right? So there is this. And again, what I can see is this guy. So I could open and go check this application. And it was used in development. And I could see this resource graph here, right? And I can see that there is multiple workload. I don't know if you're familiar with this repository, 10 microservices and a front end, and one of them card service talking to a Redis database, right? And we could see that this Redis database is actually, yes, using the template I was showing you. So in development, this project has used this Redis provision on demand in this environment, right? But what I want to show you is in staging, maybe I want something more robust. Same workload, same definition, same score files at the end of the day. And look at this. I still have the same graph, but the workload is still talking to Redis. But here, look at the difference. If I'm scrolling here, look at the difference. I have this Redis now using Terraform. So let's open this guy, right? And it took some time. Memory store provisioning in GCP is taking some time, provisioning me the private IP in order to my workload to connect to this Redis, right? But here, someone defined this recipe, which is Terraform based. And we could see now Online Boutique on staging is using this Redis memory store. Configuration, Terraform, right? And look at this. It's taking my Terraform module from a Git repository, my private internal repository. For example, you may have cloud engineer responsible to author, maintain, and build some Terraform module ready for your developer. And that's how you will export that, right? You will be able to inject some context, the variable from this developer, from this deployment, right? So that's the kind of things you could do here. And you remember the score file was the same, right? Back in the day when I showed you this, it was this guy here, a score file, right? My Redis, for example, and it was type Redis. Did I mention in cluster, memory store in GCP? Is it Azure? Is it AWS? I don't know, right? You said Redis. The same score file was deployed first in development, in cluster implementation was made. Same score file graduated in staging, and now it's Terraform, right? Because maybe you want this kind of approach. So that's the capacity and capabilities you are able to do. I just got a question from Ronaldo. Can I create new resources? Let's say I want a vSphere VM and I have my Terraform module ready. How can I make it able for developer to deploy it? Yes, good question. So let me illustrate this good question. Typically, You mentioned VM, let's say, right? First, I want to generalize the answer. First, you will go as platform engineer, you will go there and add your resource. We have fixed resource type supported. TLDR, VM is not supported, and I will explain why. But here you have resource types, a list of resource type that is not yet supported by your own organization, your own platform. But you, as platform engineer, you could add this recipe and actually support it, right? Because you remember, and sorry if I'm doing some back and forth, but I just want to connect the dot, right? Here, if I go there, you remember the available resource type, right? I'm not seeing S3 as a developer. I'm not seeing S3. I'm not seeing Azure Blob. I'm not seeing any PubSub because my platform doesn't have the recipe, the resource definition. But if my developer, my platform engineer go there and say, hey, we want to support Azure Blob, you will create that and now it will be exposed and supported, right? So that's the generic answer. That's how you will be able to have that. And in the score file, they will be able to ask explicitly for this type, right? First part of the answer. Now to be more specific on vSphere and VM, it depends. Because let's say you want to provision a VM and that's it. Yes, you can do that. But if you want to deploy this workload into the VM, that's another story. And that's today we don't support because Humanitec Orchestrator, as of today, just support as a runtime Kubernetes. So that's one of the prerequisites for the orchestrator, deploying container into a Kubernetes runtime. We are coming soon with more runtime support like VM, serverless, and other. But as of today, it's just Kubernetes runtime. So you see, for your question, good question, Ronaldo, there is a generic approach for any type. I showed you. But for VM specifically, if it's the runtime itself, we don't support it today officially. I hope that makes sense and answer your question. Otherwise, please provide more information. And Nicolas, you said similar question. And how I do here, I don't see a type that I need, right? That's your question, Nicolas. I don't see whatever, right? My own custom type or something you don't have Humanitec. Good question. There is a way to bring your own resource type. We allow customer to create their own type here, right? So that's something possible, exactly. Good question for Lambda or Fargate. No, not as of today. Today's only runtime is Kubernetes. And serverless will come later. VM will come later. But no Lambda, no Fargate as of today. Coming soon. What about Azure App Service? No. Function, same answer. Yeah, we don't support this kind of runtime today. But the goal, because you got the good point here, right? At the end of the day, from a score file, you could deploy everywhere. So Humanitec Orchestrator, we are working on expanding the runtime in order to support, hey, I want in cluster, Kubernetes here. We support any cluster, right? So OpenShift, Rancher, AKS, GKE, EKS, but all the other runtime, VM, serverless, etc., not yet. But we want to add this kind of support for sure. Yeah. Can you show an example of deploying a DynamoDB table using Terraform? I want to see how it goes, where it saves the configuration. Yeah, good question. If you don't mind, I will grab this question for the DynamoDB specifically. I don't have a live example, but we have a library of example. So it will be a good segue transition to show you some concrete example as well. And one of them is DynamoDB, if I recall correct. So I think I will be able to show you something, not live, but I prefer to keep that at the end. I'm not avoiding, but I'm just delaying a bit the answer illustration of that because I want to show you other things that may be related to that on a more generic approach. So thank you for Siva Sankar, sorry for the name. And I don't see, yeah. And actually, that's Ronaldo, sorry. So Ronaldo, I will cover this part a bit later. Cool, good question. Thank you. I love the interaction. Please continue. This kind of workshop is made and meant for that. So I have the recipes. I could decide what I want to expose and how I want to implement, right? And when to decide which one to use, right? Now, what I want to show you is this other part here, right? I added a dependency in cluster or via Terraform. Again, I could show you live, but I think for now, you got the concept here. Otherwise, let me know. I could show you live. But here I'm adding this entry, deploying, and it will provision accordingly. In dev, Redis for everyone. And we saw that for a specific project, here, or a specific, here, if I go back to Redis memory store, matching criteria, you could see this Terraform memory store is just for this project, app ID, and environment type staging, right? So that's how I could be granular, because I decided that nobody else need that. Maybe I'm wrong, but for now, that's what I want, right? Azure, yeah, I got some good question about the Azure resources. Yes, so I won't be able to show you live, but I could show you the approach for sure. So let me maybe make sure you understand the concept, because at the end of the day, you will be able to do everything with what I will show you. And I will answer the OpenTofu question very soon. So to your question, Munir, just to make sure you got it right, here, right, I said, let's say I want Azure Blob and I want Terraform. Guess what? You could do Azure Redis. You could do memory store in GCP. You could do the equivalent in AWS or anywhere. Why? Because you bring the cloud provider account, right? Authorized to deploy this Terraform script. And guess what? You bring here your Git repo, right? So here you fulfill the information, authentication to your private repo, right? You provide a branch name, you provide a subpath to your module, TF module, Azure blob, it's a subfolder, right? And that's kind of pretty much it. You will inject some variables to provide more context and input to your Terraform module. But at the end of the day, that's what you do. Now, are you using Terraform, Azure provider, GCP provider, AWS provider, whatever the provider you use? At the end of the day, it's Terraform module. What we do is just Terraform init, Terraform apply, right? So yeah, and good question for the TF state. So at the end of the day, you bring your Azure stuff, right? And you could fulfill the what, Azure Blob, how with Terraform, with your Terraform provider. And we have some example as well. I could illustrate later. Not live. Thank you for asking. But I will move on as well on that. But I hope you catch the concept, because at the end of the day, you have this guy here, right? Again, where is the Terraform module? And we do, again, Terraform init, Terraform apply. Good question from Munir. What about the TF state? Good question. You have two options here. We, by default, and that's what I'm using, by the way, look at this, managed. You could use the manage way for Humanitec, the SaaS, the orchestrator, to actually do Terraform init in our managed infrastructure, Terraform init. So we will have a Terraform state in our own infrastructure, and we will do Terraform apply in your own infrastructure. That's something doable. If you don't want to manage a state, if you don't want to manage a runner doing Terraform apply, you could use the managed. In more enterprise that I'm working with, and customer I'm working with, what they want is more security here, right? TF state could be sensitive, even if we are compliant and secure. Sometimes it's no, I need that in my own infrastructure, right? So what you could do is configure this guy and say the runner is in my own infrastructure. And by the way, my state is this Terraform state in S3, in Azure Blob, in Azure, in Terraform Cloud, wherever, right? So you have your own runner, own Terraform state. And what we will do, we will just trigger this and it will happen in your own infrastructure for networking reason, for security reason, maybe performance reason as well, right? So that's the answer for the Terraform state for this guy. Yeah. Where is the code stored? Good question, Ronaldo. So you see this guy here, the resource definition itself, right? Here I'm on a resource definition. This definition is in the SaaS, right? But you don't store any sensitive information over there, right? You have a way to store your own sensitive information in your own secret store. GSM for Google, AWS Secret Manager, Azure Key Vault, or HashiCorp Vault. All sensitive information will be there. Here you could refer externally to this secret store and secret. We don't have access to this, right? So you are able to define the recipe, the resource definition. The actual code, look at this, Terraform here, Git, your Terraform module is hosted in your own Git. To be honest, we don't have access. If you are doing Terraform runner on your own infrastructure, it will do a Git clone in your own infrastructure. On a managed perspective, yes, we will do Git clone. And we will Git clone temporary and clear the setup, the workspace, right? The Terraform workspace. But the code of your Terraform is in your own Git enterprise, whatever. And the runner will be able to Git clone in order to accomplish Terraform init, Terraform apply at the end of the day, right? I hope that makes sense and answer your question. OpenTofu natively? Really good question. Actually, we have, as of today, you remember when I said the what? So let's say Azure Blob, Terraform, template, and we have now container. It's a generic one where you could bring your own container where we have the name. And the container, instead of being Terraform, could be OpenTofu, right? So that's very easy to plug OpenTofu or other IAC tool, or even more business intelligence you want in this driver, right? So concrete implementation, right? We will come soon to your point, and thank you for asking, Adriano. We will have soon here a very specific OpenTofu, which will be behind the scene an opinionated implementation of this container, like we have for Terraform. We will have OpenTofu, but behind the scene, it will use this guy here. So yes, coming to have a more intuitive OpenTofu entry here. TLDR, it's already doable here with this container driver. Good question. I hope that clarified a little bit. I love the question. Thank you. That's very what this workshop is meant to be. For a more secure GitOps mode, if the Backstage portal is hosted on-prem, yes. How does it integrate with the Humanitec Platform Orchestrator to get the deployment status? That's a really good point. If you have Backstage, let's say in your VPN, right, behind your wall, right, that's for sure. If you want to have to interact with the orchestrator, it's a public API, public REST API. You will need to get and allow this access from your on-prem, right? Otherwise, you cannot ping our API to get status, to get information, right? So to answer this very specific question here, for sure, you will need from on-prem, wherever your infrastructure, allow the public access to our SaaS. Good question. Because at the end of the day, we are REST API. We are exposing everything as REST API. I understand where module code is, but where is the root module? that you run Terraform commands in. Again, two mode. We have a runner where we will do Terraform init and apply on a manage in our SaaS, right? Us. Or you say, no, I want the runner to be in my infrastructure. The TLDR, it will be on a Kubernetes cluster. It's a job that we will spun up for you, right? It will be a Kubernetes job doing the actual Terraform init and Terraform apply. So I'm not sure what you are referring about root module, but at the end of the day, we grab clean, we do git clone. You have your Terraform module with the main providers. We do Terraform init, Terraform apply in the runner in your infrastructure if you want. So Ronaldo, I hope it clarified. Otherwise, I'm not familiar with the notion of root module, right? You have your own root module. We don't have Terraform module. You have. OpenTofu again. Any other vendor will be supported like Env0, Spacelift. I'm not familiar with those guys. But typically, Pulumi is another one, very popular. So we will have that. Azure Bicep, Azure ARM template, CloudFormation in AWS. So yeah, at the end of the day, any IAC, infrastructure as code tool, could be done here with the same approach I mentioned with OpenTofu. Good question. Yes. Cool. For more secure, yeah, I understand where module code is. Wonderful. Nice. So what I want, and please continue with the question. Now, what I want to illustrate, right, is something about how I could inject more security, right? So here, for example, if I go back here, you remember I asked for a workload, I got an ingress, a TLS cert. That's kind of the security injection already, right? So someone was able to generate a TLS cert. Is it a wildcard? Someone generated a DNS. Is it an air record? Is it in Route 53? Is it in Cloud DNS? Where is it? Someone generated all of that and did the wire up to expose my workload, right? So already some security aspect here. But for example, if you're familiar with Kubernetes, what about making sure and enforcing some policies? Like, for example, I don't want my container to run as root. It's prohibited, right? Here, what you could do is actually injecting some security aspect like this, right? So when I deploy as a developer a workload, I'm implicitly in a context, what we call the app, the project, and the environment, right? And here I could bind a cluster. So a cluster was given to me, in this case, at this guy, right? And in the cluster, a dynamic namespace is generated for me, for my project and my specific environment, development staging or prod, right? That's how the standardization was made, right? But what you could do is look at this. Implicitly, I'm using a secure namespace. If I open this guy, here, I will be able, as platform engineer, and again, I will have the help of the other stakeholder, right? And I will be able to bring my own recipe of a namespace. And guess what? It's a namespace. It's yet another resource definition, right? In the graph. Type driver type template, type Kubernetes namespace. And here, as platform engineer, you will be able to have your own naming convention, by the way, right? And you will be able to bring your own Kubernetes manifest for the namespace. And look at this. I'm using a label, restricted PSS, pod security standard. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a built-in feature in Kubernetes, PSA, pod security admission, which is giving me best practice. in this namespace, nobody could run privilege or as root, for example, right? So I'm enforcing that with a label. But here, guess what? You could do Istio enable, right? I don't have the proper label here, but here I could enforce what I want. I could have some, I don't know, cost center label, right? For each namespace. And I could have some context because for this project, that this cost center one, for the other one, that's maybe a cost center two, for example, right? So here you will be able to use what we call the placeholder and say, hey, by the way, I want a config, right? And it will be for my app. And I want to get the output and cost center, right? And look at this. I have a generic namespace, and I'm able to inject some value here, the context of the environment, the project, as well as some config that I know this project will always have this cost center. So I will be able to inject such specific information in a generic recipe, right? So that's the ability you are able to do. Another one is in the list of resources is using here what we call the workload, because any score file is actually a workload. So there is another implicit resource definition, yet another resource definition, custom workload. And look at this. It's used by everyone for sure. And here you could test if you want to deploy your own container and running as root, you will be rejected by me because I put together this recipe. I said here, security by design. Everyone will have this. They will run as user and not root and not privilege and read-only file system. By design, if you deployed as a developer in this platform, you are kind of secure by design on a container runtime perspective, right? So that's the kind of things you could do. Again, injecting observability, injecting MTLS in Istio and Istio sidecar dynamically. So that's the kind of things you could do. Observability tool, for example, Prometheus label and metrics, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the part I wanted to show you here on a more how I could inject more about standardization and security and governance, right? I hope that makes sense here. Cool. So that's the last part, if I could say, about how to set up the best practice. What I will do is going through the rest of the content, which is a wrap-up, to be honest, and some of the pointers and references, resources that you may want to leverage. And yes, this slide deck should be available soon to you. I will double check with Sophia. And then I will do some live demonstration, kind of, with some library example we have. I remember DynamoDB and some other Azure stuff. So maybe I will be able to do that. But I want to continue with some live question. So if you want to see more demo, I will see in the docs or live. Let me know what you want to see to clarify what we illustrated. So again, we kind of saw this journey and kind of collaboration, right? Because here, at the end of the day, it's not anymore about silos, right? You could feel maybe, hey, it's still silo, but the goal, I hope you perceive that, is having the role and responsibilities of everyone collaborating, and yes, exposing, abstracting stuff, that's for sure. But that's where everyone is playing their role in order to be expert in their domain, right? So again, we saw this part where we got the developer platform, the portal in the middle, Backstage versus the Humanitec portal or other as well, the orchestrator, the score file. And again, don't underestimate this part, which is more about what I want to expose and how I want to expose, right? So the developer experience. We could help with the different tools we have, different processes and program we have. We have some programs like minimum viable program and platform to help you onboard and test our product. And if you like it, you continue, where we help you to have more platform adoption strategy and production readiness program we have. And we have some courses and training that you may want to leverage. Here, my colleague could show you the MVP program and what is it and how maybe it could help your organization to see if Humanitec products could help you or not. We have some upcoming events. I don't know if you are in the platform engineering org community, but that's also some pointer here about the courses that you may have, that you may leverage, or some webinars coming in. So that's the part I wanted to call out. And now I saw Nicolas with a question, and I could jump on some other demo. Sorry to go back a bit about SCORE and local environment. You have shown how SCORE integrates with Docker Compose. Yes, I believe there is also Helm support. Will you continue to add support to other tech like Garden, for example, or is core community open to extend support by ourselves? Really good question, Nicolas. So here, that will be score.dev. Thank you for the question. Again, that's a CNCF project now, sandbox project in the CNCF. And what we have, if I go, and sorry, I'm trying to fight with this little stuff. We have 2 open source implementation. So the score spec is one thing. That's the main part of the project. But to your point, we have 2 official open source implementation. So again, from the same score file, I could deploy this score file in Docker Compose. I could even deploy it in a Kubernetes cluster directly without Humanitec here. Very open source, very CNCF. We have our own enterprise implementation of SCORE to deploy into Humanitec, that we have kind of demonstrated. And yes, you could bring your own implementation, right? That's the documentation here, where you could take inspiration of the template we have or take inspiration of one of the 2 first we have. And we explain how you could bring your own implementation. We have, for example, from the community, we have SCORE Fly.io, for example. It's another community-driven implementation. We have someone who did a POC with Cloud Run in Google Cloud, and someone working on the Azure Container app as well. So yeah, the goal is to have the community building their own implementation for other runtime. So yeah, happy to embrace more contribution from outside. And you mentioned Helm. Actually, the SCORE Helm implementation is now deprecated. So if you have seen that in the past, this guy is now deprecated in favor of the new SCORE Kubernetes implementation. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, good question. Cool. Any other question? So far, so good. So what I want to show you is actually, I got this question for DynamoDB. So maybe let me check if we have something. I will do a quick DynamoDB, right? If I recall correct, we have some documentation here. For sure, we have the type. So that's a good illustration. Here, if you are asking yourself on the main page of the developer, what are the resource types? You remember this pop-up when I said add a resource definition? The predefined type. And again, you could bring your own type, right? But the predefined list of types is here, right? That's this one here. right? And again, you will see the contract, input or output. And for example, to your question, DynamoDB table, we have the input. So as a developer, I will be able to use this guy by providing some information, attributes, indexes, primary key, and some information, partition, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kind of information as a developer in the score file input I will be able to pass. And the actual implementation will be made by you. So you will need to bring your Terraform module, let's say, doing the AWS part of DynamoDB, right? So I don't remember who asked about DynamoDB. So that's the TLDR. And let me check something here, because I don't remember if we have something. No, we don't have directly this example here, but that's something that could be added. But yeah, for sure, we have customer using the resource type I showed you. So concretely, maybe you need more information, but supported, but I don't have a live example for you for the previous question about DynamoDB. Cool. Is there any other question? Is there anyone who would like to see more example, more demo? Let me check here. We have some application and project onboarded. Yeah, anything you want to know or see? Do you have some tutorials or some project in GitHub? Yes, for sure. Let me think out and loud where to start with this guy. So typically in the doc, we have some tutorials and getting started, right? An interesting one, if you are interested, is this guy, the link I'm sharing with you, is if you want, you could start with a local Minikube cluster, right? And bind that to Humanitec Orchestrator with a free trial, right? You could access a free trial of Humanitec for 30 days, and we could discuss for extension. And you could bind to a Kind cluster or Minikube cluster locally and already play with this orchestrator, right? So the runtime will be on a local Minikube cluster. That could be a good quick start. Otherwise, you could we have some links at the end, how to bring your own AKS, private AKS cluster, or private GKE cluster, or private EKS cluster. So that's the kind of things you could have. And see here. What I love is this example library, where you could see some very concrete example of, for example, score files. Could you show me more about how maybe someone could configure some horizontal pod autoscaler from the score file, right? Or volumes. So that's kind of concrete example. We have also some, I would say, community and example. One of them could be this guy or this guy, where you could see a lot about concrete microservices scenario, if you want. And here it's illustrating Score Compo, Score Kubernetes, and Humanitec. So that could be a good one. And I could go on and on and on. But your main entry point will be our documentation. I think we have more and more pretty solid documentation. So yeah, feel free to leverage that. And I provided some GitHub project as well. Cool. Any other question here? I hope I answered all the question.
Yeah, it seems that you answer everything, Mathieu. We don't have any.
Okay.
Here we received just now one of Ronaldo that says, why do you limit your platform or only predefined resources if someone wants to platform for managing their Cisco network devices? That is a minus point.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point, Ronaldo. So let me maybe reread the question. Limit with predefined resource, so the resource type we mentioned earlier. If someone wants a platform for managing their Cisco network devices. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, that's exactly why, because we are not a platform like the AWS console, GCP portal, Azure portal, right? Where you could do everything. What we have is a niche product helping platform engineer, cloud engineer, security engineer, observability engineer, having a kind of a centralized tool in order to define restricted, well-supported golden path and use cases, right? The goal is not to replicate self-serving in the AWS console, right? So that's why there is this. Now we could discuss with you. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. I'm customer engineer, right? So I'm not in sales, I'm post-sales, and I'm doing this kind of question and concrete implementation with my customer. At the end of the day, if it's yet another resource type, do it. But in your case, I will sit down and I will ask you, because I'm not familiar with Cisco network devices. But at the end of the day, is it a developer asking for a Cisco network devices? Maybe not, maybe. So we will clarify with you. Is it something you could abstract and inject by default into the platform and not exposing to your developer something maybe complex and maybe useless for them, right? And again, I don't have all the context, so maybe you will tell me, no, it's important for the dev. Okay, so we could sit down and see. But you see that this kind of exercise that our customers are doing with us in order to make sure they scale now and they avoid shadow IT, they avoid some complexity and cognitive load on the developer. So that will be part of my answer to your question. And yeah, it will be via Terraform, like you mentioned, right? It will be an entry point in a specific deployment. We could ask about the scope of one device, Cisco network device. Is it per workload? Is it per environment? Is it per project? Is it per line of business? Is it per the organization? You see the level of abstraction and kind of scope of this type. So good question. And I think good feeling of what you have seen. That means that you understand the predefined types. Again, you could bring your own type, but it's more a discussion on a case-by-case basis. That's why. Yeah, the dev can be a developer who requests access to an endpoint. Yeah, and they need to open. Yeah, there is multiple way to do that, right? Via a specific ask on a day-to-day basis, because that's a good point, right? Look at this core file. Am I requesting for a cluster? No. Do I need a cluster? Yes, right? So that's part of the question, right? How you onboard cluster. Is it pre-existing? Are you creating on demand? Are you creating at the project onboarding? That's a kind of question we illustrate and answer, because on a day-to-day basis, I shouldn't have the cluster information in this core file, because at scale, I will have thousands of workload, maybe container. Maybe they will go in the same cluster, maybe not. Is it per line of business again? Is it per environment? So that's the kind of design you, platform engineer and ops, have to deal with and design and standardize, right? And if it's, but it's very day-to-day basis in the score file, I need something and having more self-serving, yeah, why not, right? But that's a kind of level of abstraction platform engineering and building your own IDP is very appealing, right? So I agree, but that's a kind of scenario that could be discussed, how you abstract, right? Good question. And I don't have the specific answer, but that's the approach, which is very important here. Is there a roadmap, more of the cloud provider runtime coming to Humanitec? I think we have this here, but I'm sure it won't answer your question. Where we have the roadmap here, still in the developer docs on the left, very bottom left. But it's very generic, so maybe it could give you an idea. But happy, contact us. Happy to chat more on more detail here. Personally, I don't have time frame in mind. So, but yeah, that's something we are working on. Good question. Anything you want me to show you? Maybe I was going fast for sure. It's a webinar. I'm trying to push as much context in this end-to-end workflow and story between the two personas. Maybe we could just have 2 more minutes in case we don't have any other question. Oh, could we have this workshop and presentation in French? Actually, I have some customer in the French community, if I could say, because I'm living in Quebec City. But yeah, we could do that in France or other French country for sure. Could we do a webinar in French? I don't know. That's a good question, good ask. I will pass along the request. Thank you for the feedback, Munio. What do you think, Sophia? Should we wait for?
Yeah, that's
2 more minutes or?
No, I think it was very clear, the information. Thanks a lot, Mathieu, for the workshop. I hope everyone enjoys as much as I did with Mathieu. Please remember that tomorrow we will send the presentation along with the recording. And also feel free to reach out to us, Mathieu, me, or whatever you need for platform engineering. You have already the Slack channel also. So every doubt, everything that you want to know more deep dive, you can reach out to us and we can discuss, of course. So I think this is it for today because I see that everyone has everything very, very clear. Thanks everyone for the comments and of course, Mathieu, for your time. And I think that's it for today.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the interaction, the question. Let us know if we could help.
Okay, amazing. Thanks a lot and bye-bye. See you soon, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you, everyone.